that's full of oil. And it looks like this. There's huge untapped reserves of this unconventional source all through North America. The prime source is this shale rock. But the problem is getting the stuff out of the rock. And the rock is anything like 8,000 feet down before you hit it. 4,000 feet below the oil wells themselves is the shale rock. So you go down 4,000 feet to the oil well, and then another 4,000 feet you hit the rock, the shale rock. And over millions of years, the gas has slowly been released and it works its way up to the dome, all the way up into here. Finally, after 20 years of experimenting, a way was found to tap into it. They were able to drill sideways. They go down 8,000 feet and then they sideways. And they sideways for 2 miles. And they drill out in 16 different directions. They then fill the well with water, sand, and explosives and detonate it. And that fracks open the rock and it releases the oil and the gas. So where is this all coming from? Okay. The first shale seams to be tapped into was what's called Eagle Ford in southern Texas and in Appalachians, which in the American East, northeast. They drilled down 8,000 feet and they hit these seams that were 40 feet thick. Then they moved on to Montana, and in the shale fields there called Bakken, these ended up being 400 feet thick, and they thought they were doing quite well. This is the Bakken up on the border with Canada, and those fields extend up into Canada as well, and they're tapping them there. This is Appalachians, and this is the Eagle Ford. So it's 40 feet here, 40 feet here, 400 feet here. But this is the Pima Basin. Another name for it is Petroplex, but I'll come to that in a minute. When they drilled in the Pima Basins, this is when they found the 1920 oil fields, and these are the fields that had run dry. They drilled down 8,000 feet to hit the shale rock, and they found the shale rock was 4,000 feet thick, and it was the size of New Zealand, 105,000 square kilometers. Massive area for oil. At first, the oil coming out of these fields fed the inland refineries, but so much oil was coming out, the refineries were overloaded. So they reversed the pipelines from the coast to the refineries in the middle of Texas to the point that they overflowed. Then the railroads became overloaded, and so were the roads. There's just too much oil coming out. So they built 3 massive oil pipelines to the coast. And when they came online, America became oil independent, no longer needed to import oil. It could export again. Oil prices collapsed from 100 to 150 back down to $50 a barrel. Shale oil became what's called the swing vote in oil prices. If demand drops, then the shale stops. If demand goes up, shale kicks back in again. This is the conventional oil in America. This is the Prude Hole, North Alaska. And this is the shale kicking it. It was quite dramatic. This is from the Bakken, Eagle Ford, and this is the Pima Basin or Pima or Petroplex, how much oil is coming out of that zone. Now, with a break-even point of $50 to $60 a barrel, many companies, drilling companies, went broke. And as you can see here, this is the break-even point for each of the different oil fields around the world. The Canadian tar sands were the swing vote until the shale really kicked in, and this is why it's come back down into this zone, this price. The prices go high, they start producing. If the prices are low, they cut back. But unlike conventional oils, shale oil only lasts 2 years. The production drop is quite steep, so they have to keep moving the rigs to another location, to another location, to another location. Usually only a couple of miles, and then they re-drill the 16 wells in a spider web. So this is the daily production. It drops off quite quickly, and this is the amount of output coming from each well. And this is what happens over the countryside as they go to each site, depending on how much oil is coming out of the ground. And this is what the wells look like underground. When COVID hit, oil prices collapsed. The drilling stopped and the crews dispersed. Since then, the oil rig recovery has been slow. They've got to bring the crews back together. In 2020, there were 700 rigs. That dropped down to 200. So the oil flow has slowed down quite a bit from the shale. It's slowly risen to 620. And with, as I said, with the wells going dry within 2 years, production amount fell quite quickly. New investors and banks of these oil drilling companies are wanting to see a serious return for the money. The number of rigs has been pulled back to 515 as of September this year. So they're being more cautious this time because they got stung quite badly. This is the number of the drilling rigs in the US. It's been pulled back. And this is the price of oil. And it's been pulling back. And again, we're still trading in the 70 to 80 barrel zone. We have been up to 100, which has triggered the inflation. With OPEC pulling back, Russia not able to sell as much, the drop in supply is pushing prices higher. So with oil seeping into every part of the economy, and the rising price is likely to drive inflation higher and keep it in place for longer. Again, as a society's wealth is decided by the cost of its energy. We go back to the equation, MV equals PQ. If the price goes up, the quantity comes down. And conversely, if quantity comes down, the price goes up. Prices rise and drive up inflation. So even with money supply falling, which is what they've been doing to try and get the inflation under control, the quantity of oil has been falling. So the price has been rising, which keeps driving that inflation. And it could stay around for a while yet. One of the icons on my desk is actually the oil price on a day-to-day basis. I watch that quite closely, and it gives me an indication as to how successful interest rates are controlling inflation. And if I see oil prices rising, then I know we've got sticky inflation that's going to be around for a while. If it comes down, there's hope. Does that make sense, Ebonice?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm just trying to think, how can we educate people to be more aware of what's going on around them, and how an average Joe blog would understand how that's going to affect, how the oil prices will affect him and his decision whether he should invest into property right now or not. Because obviously a lot of people look just at the housing rates alone. They don't look at how the inflation may affect what's behind the scenes.
Well, the inflation affects the interest rates. And if we've got sticky inflation because oil prices are staying high, then we can anticipate that the interest rates are not going to come back soon. But if those oil prices come down, and capitalism at its best, everyone tries to outcompete each other, and I would dare say those oil rig numbers will start rising and start producing more, prices come down, inflation comes down, the Reserve Bank drops its interest rates, which flows through into our interest rates that we're paying. So looking at it, you can choose, do you do floating because they're going to come down, or you do fixed because you're not too sure what's going to happen in 12 months? Or if we've got quite sticky inflation because those bloody oil prices aren't coming down, then we may be looking at 18 months, 2 years.
Because that's what's the main question at the moment for a lot of my clients is, should I fix, and if yes, for how long? Obviously everyone's situation is different, whether they're going to be flipping a property in 12 months. Obviously they shouldn't be fixing for 3 years, but the interest rate as high as they are right now, I think they've been the highest we've seen in, I don't know how many years. When was the last time you've seen 7%, Shane?
Probably 10 years ago.
I was about to say 10 years because I think that was around the time shortly after I bought my first home. I remember the rates were around 8.5, 9 when I bought my first home.
But I mean, even those were considered low rates. In
Yes,
the
all
80s, we were looking at
down.
22%.
Yeah, funny enough, I had a dentist lady tell me this today. She goes, "Oh, but when I was young, the interest rates were 25%." And I said to her, "Yeah, but your mortgage was probably 4 times of your salary versus right now we're seeing a lot of 10 times of your salary."
And again, this comes back to land prices and the restriction on land. The
Mm,
unitary plan, which is allowing more housing density.
mm,
I've seen in Palmerston where I bought land for 20,000 a section in 1990, and those sections are now worth 400,000. I mean, it's just insane.
yeah,
Um, I certainly rode that escalator quite well, but because of the restriction on land use, that means that land prices will have to go up. So with the intensity allowing the 2, 3 story buildings, that should stabilise it. There's
yeah,
lots of other excuses, including what Labor did with not allowing interest to be claimed on mortgages. That's
yeah.
just that's just straight out of penal
Actually,
tax.
Shane, our last webinar we did on different governments and who's going to be doing what. Now that we sort of got the government in place, almost, I haven't followed the news too close because I don't have a TV. So, what are your thoughts on this? Who's gonna?
Well, National have said that they'll Labor's policy was no interest on new purchasing existing property. If you've got existing property, it was the 20, 75, 50, which we are now. Next year would be 25, and the year after that, 0. National have said that next year will be 50, the year
Okay.
after that, 50, then 75, 25, 0. ACT have said they will get rid of the whole lot. So it's going to be interesting to see where these negotiations go. Winston Peters is an unknown.
Yeah, because isn't he the kingmaker at the moment?
Well, yeah, well, he and Seymour are both the kingmakers. They've both got that swing vote. So National has to negotiate with them. So it'll be interesting to see what is negotiated through.
Yeah.
The
What was
call coming
we?
from National is we don't have the money to release landlords.
Yeah.
Well, there's going to be a side effect of that, and there's going to be less supply for rental
Mm,
accommodation because we don't have empty rentals. There's this claim that we're putting too much money into property. If
yeah.
that were the case, we would have mass empty houses in this country. We don't. So something else is going on, and take away the excuses that the politicians want to give. What's the reality? And it comes back down to this land price issue.
Mm. Do you know, just from the top of your head, if you know at all, how many empty houses have we got going on in New Zealand at the moment?
Well, in my own city, there's none. So, and that flows all the way through the country. There's
I just
not
see,
empty houses. So we do not have an overinvestment in houses. If anything, we have an underinvestment.
because remember there was an article, I don't remember when, maybe like a year ago or so, about all these houses sitting empty in Auckland and other areas of New Zealand because it was cheaper just to let them be empty than rent them out.
Well, it can't be cheaper unless if you've got $700,000 invested in a property and you've got no mortgage. If you've got a mortgage, you've got to have cash flow to supply it, to feed that mortgage.
Mm.
If you've got no mortgage on it, you've got $700,000 not earning any money.
Mm.
That really doesn't make sense. And
No,
anyone who's doing that is actually chewing up their capital. They're not getting a return.
yeah, yeah. No, I get it. But I think it was around foreign investors. Maybe it was the labor's angle around the foreign investors that they came to New Zealand, bought all these properties, and now they're just letting them be. I need to find that article. It's really interesting that they were blaming all these foreign investors. Shane, I've got a question here for you. Is there a correlation for the land appreciation or the value of the money depreciation? Actually, a good question. So money depreciating on one side and land appreciating on the other side. Is there any correlation between them?
An asset that's not being used is actually costing you. It's the opportunity cost, because if, as I said before, if you've got a $700,000 house, you put that $700,000 in the bank, you're going to get $56,000 a year interest. That's almost, in fact, that's over $1,000 a week you're sacrificing. In the meantime, you've still got to pay the rates. You've still got to pay the insurance on that building, even if it's empty.
Mm,
And if you've got a mortgage on that, you are bleeding.
mm,
So there is a very strong incentive to keep houses ticking over. And people who don't rent out their houses need some better financial advice.
mm. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that coming through at the moment, honestly. On the weekend, I had a guy and he's due for a refix of his mortgage, and the interest rate's now so high that whatever he's earning is not even going to cover his mortgage repayments.
That's when it starts to get scary. Now,
Yeah,
is that his own home or is that a rental?
it's his own home. So now he needs
Mm.
to get few flatmates to help him.
Yeah. And all that reduces demand for new housing,
Mm.
and it reduces inflation. This is why they pump up interest rates.
And then
What's
also,
going to really sting is those with mortgages and have rental properties, because you've got this income coming in which you get taxed on, but you
yeah.
can't claim the expense.
Yeah, yeah. Now I'm in that boat, Shane. We're gonna get hit hard next year. We're already getting hit hard, and yeah, I really
The,
hope things will change. I have another client which was really interesting, and they bought a piece of land here in Kapiti a few years ago at a high, at a peak, and they were planning to build a house. A few years later, now down the track, they still haven't built a house, and the quotes they're getting are just ridiculous to build a house there. So they're sitting on this piece of land that they've converted from, I think, rural to residential. And now they need to think whether they want to subdivide it or not. But she's been told no one's buying land at the moment because it's too expensive to build.
and they haven't actually lived in that property. So there's a high chance they're going to be up for a bright line test
Yeah.
and be taxed on any capital gains.
So even if it's a piece of land and you
If
haven't lived on it,
if it's residential land, which they've converted it to residential, bright line test.
wow.
And they need to be also careful that bright line test starts on settlement date, that's easy, but finishes when you sign the contract. Not when you settle, not when you go unconditional, but when you first sign it.
Wow. That's one thing that people forget. Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah,
That's,
be careful on that one.
yeah, yeah, no, thank you.
A lot of people haven't yet seen the true cost of this non-deductibility of interest, because
Mm,
we've got ring fencing. And the ring fencing, people are using up the losses in that, so they're not seeing the real cost. And the returns we're doing at the moment, it's starting to creep in, but not a lot. But next year it'll bite.
yeah,
When they've run out of the losses, they've got high interest rates, they can't claim the cost, or they can only claim half of it, and they'll be starting to bleed. And they'll be forced into position to sell houses.
yeah.
And if National wants to get people out of motels, which I completely agree with, there's got to be a supply of
Mm,
housing. And the most cost effective way of doing that is getting landlords back in again, providing they're more reactive, they are more responsive to a market than what the likes of Housing Corporation.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree. And it was really interesting to see how the government has cancelled now the partnership scheme because they've overcommitted themselves. So this is where the government was buying a property with and customer buying with the government, and the government will contribute up to 250,000. But apparently they haven't done their budget right, and they've given away too much money that they even had in the pot. So
And they don't have the money for it. Exactly.
no, that was really interesting to see. But I mean, they would make their money back if the properties go back up in value. the client has to buy back the share, whatever
Yes.
the government has contributed, at that market price at that time.
But eventually the government will get its money back plus some more, but
Mm,
not today.
mm,
And if you've got a cash flow crunch, which is what they've got today, you've got problems.
mm. So it's really interesting to see who does the accounts in the government to have missed the boat, how much they've overcommitted themselves into.
Well,
And
they
it,
probably weren't anticipating the demand.
well, surely they would know if people have nowhere to live, people would turn for any help to get into a housing.
Yeah. Are
Especially,
you seeing first home buyers or are you seeing property investors?
I'm getting the property investors back. Definitely, they all sort of have a bit more faith that with the national in power, they will get more bang for the buck over time. But also the first home buyers, I'm getting a lot of FOMO coming back, where they're
Oh, fear of
afraid.
missing out. Yeah.
Yes, they're afraid that they will miss out, and I'm seeing them getting again emotionally dangerous at the offers that they're making, because if the investor goes in and under offers on the property that's let's say 500K, they would put 450 as an investor. The emotional buyers, the first home buyers, in order not to miss out, they will go and put 550. So this is again where we've got this I call it artificial inflation, where emotionally driven gets to higher prices because the agents put this fear into them that, hey, if you don't put your best foot forward, you're going to
Oh,
miss out.
yeah.
And poor first home buyers, they don't know what they're doing. So they just go out, they go all in.
Well, they've got to do a balancing act. And is the rent going to be cheaper than the mortgage?
Mm,
And
mm,
if the gap is too big, they will continue to rent. If
yeah,
rents go too high, then they'll start looking at buying. The market does self-regulate.
yeah,
But the biggest, and I've said this before, the biggest problem is the land value and the land usage.
yeah. So I need to
By
I need to send my client to you with their land so they can understand what to do with that land.
Well, I saw an interesting one in Dunedin where the land value became so high that it was worthwhile lifting the existing house and they put another flat underneath.
Wow,
So they had a 6 bedroom house on the section already. Then they lifted it and put another 6 bedroom underneath.
nice.
And they split the front yard and the backyard. The front yard was the bottom house. The backyard was the upper house.
Yeah,
That was the yard. And they got 12 students on that section.
nice.
So instead of a 3 bedroom house, instead of 3 people living there, they've got 4 times as many.
Yeah,
So the capital cost per room, per generating room, has dropped dramatically.
yeah. My goodness. And they would probably get the new code of compliance, and now they would become
Claim 100% on it, yes.
yeah. Clever. No, that's really good. And I think that's again, I guess you have to stay updated with what the government will change in terms of when it comes to accountancy and what you can
I
be
I
exempt.
have learnt the hard way. Wait until it's actually passed before you review it, because numerous times over the last 30 years, I've seen legislation come in and at the last minute do a 180-degree turn, and suddenly you realize you're giving advice on a legislation that doesn't exist. So
Yeah,
you may hear rumors, and again, we've heard nationals say, look, we'll lift it from 50 to 75 to 100%. But the old adage, how do you know a politician's lying?
yeah,
His lips are moving.
yeah, that's right.
So yeah, we'll start getting some directions. I reckon it's going to be 100 days. Um, but over Christmas, that'll be interesting because the bureaucrats will want their holidays.
Yeah.
So are they going to get it through? Hopefully, they'll get it through before the 1st of April
Well, knowing anything I know so far about politics, they'll probably wait until the 1st of April.
to announce it, and then they'll decide to do it from the 1st of June because it's the government's books,
That's right.
which is insane because most people have the 1st of April as a new financial year for them.
That's right. That's right. Interesting. We've got in Mike Piro in our mortgage business, we've got our own financial year as well, and that kicks in. I think that kicks in from 1st of July, the new numbers.
Really?
From 1st of July, yeah, because we've got like they look at how much lending you've done over the last 12 months. I'm sure it kicks in from 1st of July. Always trips me out, but I think it's because of Australia. What's Australian financial year? Is it July?
30th of June, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe that's what explains. Yeah. So when they look at our numbers and how much lending we've done over the last 12 months, it always goes from July to July. Well, July to June. Yeah.
Because Piro's now Australia based, is it?
Well, Liberty owns Mike Piro. So
Yeah.
Liberty is, yeah, in Australia, a big financial corporation.
Oh, so they got it changed.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to see what happens. But Shane, thank you so much. This was really, really informative. I hope people got the message you're trying to convey here. I mean, economics is always not for the faint-hearted. It was a subject I took in high school, and because I didn't want to do the home economics, because I realized home economics was about cooking and measuring butter. And I was like, no, that's not for me. So I quickly swapped into normal economics, and I was like, oh my God, let me go back to measuring butter, but they wouldn't because it was too late. So, so I totally get it that, it can be a bit of a wild forest, but thank you so much for making it so nice and simple to understand in simple terms that we are currently in a very sticky situation, and the light at the end of the tunnel is still there, but not as close as we thought it would be, I reckon.
Just be cautious.
Just be cautious. That's right. So thank you so much. The questions that we've had, I've already asked you so far, and I'm sure if people, I've had a few people message me saying they will watch after on replay. So I bet there'll be more questions coming out afterwards. Thank you so much, Shane, for tonight. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas break. Are you shutting down your office at all?
Just New Year's,
No.
Christmas, New Year's, we shut down for about 2 weeks.
Nice. I'm working right through. So if anyone's watching this and need mortgage advice, feel free to come in. I always tend to work through and help clients out, because a lot of mortgage brokers actually go on holiday at that time. There's no point working, really. The banks are all working on skeleton stuff, and the lawyers are all shut down. But still interesting to see what's going on out there. So thank you, Shane. Enjoy your Christmas, and I hope to see you in person before the Christmas holidays. I'll come and see you in Palmy. Have a fantastic evening. Thank you for staying
Rosalie.
up tonight. Take care.